Welcome to On Digital Media. I'm your host and executive producer, John Federico, which means not a whole hell of a lot, but typically it means I bring the smart people on the show. And joining me tonight are two of the smartest people I know. Starting from the other side of town in my upper right on my screen is Mr. Craig Calder.
Greetings and salutations. Happy to be here.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you. And joining us from the Bay Area is Ms. Shailene Simmons.
Hey, everyone.
Thanks, guys, for pulling it together. So we haven't heard any negative things from anyone. I've gotten only positive so far. So we're going to start recording on Tuesday nights for those of you listening. So it might change things a little bit for you and for us because we're less burnt out on Tuesday nights. Than we are on
We're
Thursday
drinking
nights.
a lot more on Thursday nights on the show than you'll see us drinking on Tuesdays, right?
Yes.
Right now, I'm quaffing like a little iced tea, but by Thursday, I might be downing like a scotch. So
Yeah. It's just that time of the week. Although I've never, it's hard for me to do an ODM without at least a drink. I had a skinny Cosmo a moment ago, a pink girly drink. Yes.
did you get a skinny girl Cosmo? Please don't tell me you did. It's going to kill it for me. So, we need to ban that from the show. We started out as a good drinking show.
We did. I know. It was a homemade skinny. Never mind. Long story. All right.
But Thursday night is the pros' night to go out in New York City. Only amateurs go out on the weekend.
It's true. It's one of the reasons actually why we could leverage Thursdays for our
networking
pursuits.
for us.
Yes. Exactly.
We like to go out too and drink with not each other.
With not each other, right.
Virtually, which is tantamount to us drinking alone, really. So
that's true. We're drinking alone together. That's right.
Exactly.
How sad is that? That's sad.
It is kind of weird. We used to drink together at Studio 1A. So
we
there
did.
You go.
Yeah, Studio 1A doesn't exist anymore. Well, there's this, which is, I guess, Studio 2A, which still needs paint. And see, there's the paint on the wall. That's the paint swatch. What do you guys think of the color? Let me know. Anyway. All right. Let's get into it.
Wait, are you a goth?
Am I goth? No, that's actually like what color is that? That's like a grayish green. Anthracite. No, it's not that dark. It looks that dark only because of the video. We'll see how it looks. I already bought the paint. We'll hopefully in the next couple weeks we'll get it on the wall. So anything's better than the gingham, my son's old gingham curtains and the white shutters. Yes. So we'll get that taken care of. All right. Everything hinges. I don't know about everything. Maybe not everything, but a lot hinges. Not just the show, but most of the things on the internet hinge on the proposed net neutrality regulations that went into what is called the comment period last week. So before we get into that, Shailene, as our resident legal counsel, what is the comment period?
So the comment period is a time where the government basically, before it sets out proposed rules, allows basically folks to write amicus briefs. And amicus briefs are friends of the court, folks who basically write on behalf of either position for or against the rules that the government is proposing. And so this is an open period where anybody, whether or not it's corporations or a consortium of folks, such as computer professionals for social responsibility, all of these folks would gather together and write, for pro or con for the rules. And so it's a very important period before things actually get set and rolled out to the rest of us. So,
I never thought about this question until now. Can we write an amicus brief? Like, how do you become a friend of the court, and how are you eligible to submit an amicus brief? It's a legal question more than a digital media question, but it just made me think.
Typically it takes a lot to actually write amicus briefs for administrative courts. So it's certainly not something for amateurs like ourselves to basically draft a legal document for or against. I think a lot of people to join amicus briefs basically support organizations that actually are doing so. For example, as I mentioned, one that I'm quite fond of, which is a Computer Professionals for Social Responsibility. So.
Got it. So there's nothing limiting us from doing it. It's really just about skill and experience. It's really what.
Yes, theoretically speaking, yes.
Theoretically speaking. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry. Thank you for the legal lesson. I was it just dawned on me when I asked that question, like, hey, can we write one? All right.
Not that I myself have ever experienced this, and this is, by the way, don't hold me to this. I am not a practicing attorney currently, and practicing
Well,
in
you
an
do play one
administrative
on
court.
TV.
I do play one on TV, but just worse than anyone playing on TV. So as an attorney.
All right. So they've entered the comment period. So here's the thing. So what were the regulations? They're not good. Or let me rephrase that. Better way of putting them is they don't give me the warm fuzzies. Is that a better way of putting it?
That just doesn't sound so legal to me, but yes.
It's nothing to do with legal. It doesn't give me the warm fuzzies. So let's see. What are they proposing? The ability to have quote unquote fast lanes. So multiple speeds. That actually did come into this discussion previously, and it is part of the not final, I should say, but the suggested ruling, which came from the FCC. Scary. What else? Anything else that was interesting?
No, I think the key here is that, the providers can't slow people down deliberately. They have to offer a base sort of speed service to everybody. But what they're allowed to do is to give certain people priorities. It's like having the fast pass for lack of a better sort of analogy right
for
now.
Disney, yes.
For Disney. And in this case, for example, for folks like Netflix who have paid to get the fast pass to ensure that they could actually drive on the fast lane. And they've done that, right? So, and they feel forced to do that. And so I think that's sort of the case, which is, can a podcast like ours, which is also running on a tremendous amount of video, get a fast pass, or will we be rendered basically slower and therefore nobody wants to watch us on Apple TV or, a Roku box, right? But they will be happy to watch anything from Netflix because Netflix has paid, but not us. So that becomes the issue.
What were you saying, Craig?
So my guess is we're not going to be given a pass to the fast lane.
No.
I mean, we are not the anointed few. We are the unwashed masses. And that's the thing that kind of, tweaks me is that as soon as you start giving people, the people who can pay the most preferential treatment, things start to go south. And I understand it from a business perspective. It makes sense, and we could potentially benefit from it if we were, Netflix subscribers. But it's just kind of, like you said, John, it just doesn't feel warm and fuzzy, and it's kind of scary because even if they don't mean to start out, being nefarious, it will become nefarious.
I think, honestly, guys, it has a chilling effect in terms of, the startup environment and, the sort of proliferation of new businesses, especially in the video side, right? Because if you think about it, it's a pretty heavy toll, most likely, that you have to pay to be in the speed pass lanes. And so that means that, the really major players such as Netflix of the world, Hulu, YouTube have the capability to bring, yes, little people like us, we're on YouTube, so they could bring us, to the forefront. But what does it mean in terms of a chilling effect on new businesses that are coming forward that could compete against the Hulus and the, YouTubes? So are you basically raising, VC funds to basically buy a toll in order to basically get at the same speed where you never had to do that before? There was a level playing ground between you and Netflix, and tomorrow, it becomes, a toll gate. And so consumers will only look at things that are moved fast because they have always demonstrated a lack of patience for slow-moving technology. So,
and this story came from a letter that Voss wrote to the FCC, and his point, very short letter, very poignant, and he basically said, if Apple users were charged by how many bits they used, you guarantee that company would not have grown as fast as it has naturally by being unencumbered. And to your point, Shailene, that's exactly it. It is going to be a chilling effect on new businesses who can't afford to compete with the bigger, more well-funded companies. And those well-funded companies will use it as an unfair advantage to keep the smaller companies from getting in. So it's definitely going to have a chilling effect. And you know, we don't even know how bad it's going to be, but you know.
Mm-hmm. It will become an oligarchy, right? There'll be the
Yep.
Netflix, Hulu. It will be, YouTube. And so, some of the articles that we're going to be discussing a little bit later, for example, Google's looking to buy Twitch. Companies like Twitch that, came out of a little, startup called Justin TV would have never had the same capability to basically deliver the type of content that they're delivering, which is, for Christ's sakes, people watching videos of people playing video games, right? I mean, where would they have gotten the money to basically pay the toll to basically deliver all of that video? They just would not have been able to.
So let's go there for a minute. Is that one of the reasons? Now I'm speculating. Actually, I'm not even speculating. I'm just downright pulling stuff out of someplace dark, but I'm doing it for the sake of controversy. Is that why Twitch is selling? Because is that one of the reasons they're selling? Because not just because YouTube wrote a big check, or is considering writing a big check, but because the market is getting more competitive. Bandwidth is expensive, and they can't necessarily afford to pay the toll for the fast lane.
Look, I think paying the fast lane toll is probably the least of the concerns, but do I think that there is a huge competitive business today in video? Absolutely. I think it's much harder to attract the attentions of viewers nowadays, and they are consolidated in large pockets in the internet. And so, if Google came knocking with $1 billion, I mean, hell, no matter how successful I am, I'd sell.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think
there's
that
not
was
an exit,
the
by
reason.
the way.
I don't think that was the reason. I just think it's coincidence.
We could look at the market today in terms of where, startup companies have exits. This isn't the heyday of the 90s where, any IP, if you had, something ecommerce.com, then you're going to IPO, right? And that is not the world that we live in today. Whether or not you believe we're in tech bubble or not, companies have very few available exits for them. We've seen some successful IPOs recently, but I don't think that it's a very big window. So right now, the sort of exit for a lot of these VCs and companies is basically an acquisition by a large company. And so there are only a few companies with deep pockets. It's Google, it's Yahoo, it's Amazon, it's any number of these sort of large corporations. And so, man, like, this is a freaking beautiful acquisition for Twitch. I'm thrilled for them. Google's getting out of it for YouTube.
It'll be a good marriage for them. Absolutely. I mean,
It is.
Assuming it happens, of course, it's still a rumor. Just like the Apple Beats rumor, which we still haven't heard anything on. But for $1 billion in some respects, I think, they're in this article, which we pulled from Variety, by the way. Thank you, Variety. Twitch accounted for almost 1.5% of all video traffic on the internet right now. So it's pretty clear, in my opinion, that it's no longer niche, as niche as people think. They call video game streaming. They're calling Twitch in particular the ESPN of video games, and I think that's pretty accurate. I have an 11.5-year-old, and other than the language, of course, that some of these guys use when watching their videos, my son is, which I don't approve of, but in terms of like playing games, learning games, being part of the community, my son loves it, and he's learned a tremendous amount from it. And I could see why it is the next ESPN, because there are all these gamers who grew up on the internet, and that's what they understand. That's what they appreciate.
You've got kids as young as 6-year-olds basically watching Minecraft videos on YouTube and, Twitch right now. And so they're heavily into gaming, and it's, it makes a lot of sense. And so the demographic is not just your sort of geeky, 13 to, 45-year-old men. Candidly, it's the kind of viewership that probably would benefit YouTube quite a lot. I suspect, although we haven't seen those stats necessarily recently, that YouTube could probably skew pretty female. And so this could really bring an inflood of, I think a much needed demo for advertising to the site.
That's interesting. Craig, you buy a lot of ads for, customer acquisition and so on. I mean, what do you know about YouTube demos?
I just think I think you're probably right, Shailene. It probably does skew more female compared to an average ad buy. The interesting thing about YouTube is it is just so massive that you can target just about anything. And it's almost like Facebook in the way that you can target custom audiences and do and I really think there's a lot of opportunity in kind of the pre-roll stuff that people are doing now. And I've seen some really good results with that. And for certain, I think that's kind of a really an untapped resource. And it's really one of the first ad units that give the user the opportunity to opt out, right? This video will end in 2 seconds if you're not interested, right? Click here. And I think that's kind of the cutting edge of advertising experience. And I think that they have the opportunity to experiment a lot. I think that's where a lot of the new things are going to be coming from.
What I find interesting here is that, for the longest time, consumer packaged goods companies have been sort of loathing to invest in advertising in YouTube because when we think about user-generated content as marketers, there's always an inherent risk that you're basically bringing your company brand and potentially attaching it to things that are slightly unseemly or problematic in one way or the other, whether or not that's a trademark violation, copyright violation, or God knows, somebody could run around, accidentally, taking their clothes off. User generated, it's always sort of caused some real concerns around placing ad units. And this is why you saw basically YouTube bringing in, program content, whether or not that program content, revolves around big companies like ABCs and NBCs of the world, or, small little production companies that are putting out amazingly great programming and, for lack of a word, like TV shows. And so in many ways, this is just, it is like an augmented sport. Basically, it's a sports channel for YouTube now. And that is a valuable sort of commodity for them to basically have ad units against. Because again, from a user-generated content perspective, it's a known quantity. You know what a Minecraft video looks like. You generally know what, Call of Duty looks like. I mean, it's a little bit bloody, but it's, your 10 o'clock show. And so you know how to place ads against that as a CPG company. So it's definitely a very good opportunity for YouTube.
And you know what the real opportunity with YouTube is? It's it's the typical way Google launches products. They throw it out there, and Gmail was in beta for 7 years. And they simply are just letting YouTube, I think, develop organically. Not to say that Google isn't putting a lot of effort into building YouTube, but they're also not, putting a lot of effort in fixing a lot of things. They're kind of letting it happen. And I guess for me, the real thing is there's some amazing content on YouTube, but the search and the way stuff is organized, and it's just so kludgy. And when they figure that out, or they decide to unleash, Google Organized on YouTube, look out. It is going to be a juggernaut.
Yeah, but there is definitely a strong interest in basically making YouTube more of a sort of financial sort of contributor to the Google family of revenues, right? Because, for the longest time, Google is not, a company that advertises. But what I've seen very recently is a lot, and I mean a lot of advertising for Google in both print as well as digital media. They're actually highlighting some of their most famous sort of user content creators. I saw, the girl that Michelle Fan or whatever her name is,
Yep. The makeup.
the makeup artist, and then
Yep.
the girl who makes, gaming cakes. And so they're really going out there and actually marketing this product, because I suspect that, they're going to put a heck of a lot more efforts around this particular product. And then, because there's real money to be made here.
And guess what? We're not the target audience. It's our children.
Hey, speak for yourself. I watch Michelle Fan. I want to look like Frozen, the girl from Frozen.
You're a hipster, but I mean, really, what they're really targeting are, teens and 20-somethings, because they realize that they're the future market that they want to reach into. They're no dummies.
Yeah, I'm 21 plus a few more years, as my daughter says.
Plus
I've got her
years.
trained. Plus a few more years. I got her trained.
She knows. She knows. We've seen just in the past couple of weeks here in Manhattan, subway ads. A whole, and they never just do a subway ad anymore, right? It's always a takeover. They take over one half of a car, and they've been pushing, a lot of the YouTube creators. It's been interesting, actually. So it's so interesting that I took photos of them, and I shared them because I thought that they did a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to like what a quote unquote user generated content and the new, let's go back to the old. That was a horrible segue. But this came up. It's also video related as usual, and it's a little more traditional in the sense that it is not over the internet, but it is pretty amazing. AT&T, the telecom company we all love to hate, or at least I do. And Craig does. Shailene, what are you on, Verizon?
I'm on Verizon. I've been a Verizon person for a while.
I'm still on AT&T, but I hate them.
Yeah, I'm with you there. They just bought DirecTV, the satellite TV company, and they have become, according to courts, a new force in the U.S. television industry.
Well, in all fairness, it has not passed through.
No, it has not gone through regulators yet. Correct.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't see anything good coming of it.
No.
What you mean? A predatory telecom company buying another somewhat predatory, television delivery company? What could be wrong with that?
So this is coming fast at the heel of basically the Comcast Time Warner acquisition and merger, and so this is the best analogy I could give, because I'm all about
killed, didn't it?
No, because they need to divest themselves of a couple of different assets, and that's still being worked out, I think. But to me, I'm all about analogies tonight, so work with me here, because I'm trying to be relevant, like Craig saying, I want to be the target audience, the 21 plus-ish gal. So my analogy is that it's basically like Godzilla against Mothra here, right? So everybody's gathering their power, and so it's battle royale between the monstrosities that's being created here. So it remains to be seen how this is actually beneficial to all of its little ant people. In one of these movies, in the Godzilla movie, I think we're going to get stomped on pretty hard as these monsters are sort of raging through and collecting as many things as they can along the way. So.
Well, other than the obvious, which is having more reach into homes, right, and diversifying their businesses, I don't know. Are there any synergies to an acquisition like this? I mean, you can deliver internet over satellite. DirecTV and its ilk has something like that. But other than the obvious, I mean, what am I missing here? It just seems like a diversification of business.
Content. It's all about content licensing. It's about negotiation for content licenses in terms of the capability to basically negotiate. So it's going to be killer for the content providers, because now AT&T and DirecTV have a consolidated buying power and negotiation power that neither had together. Right? The consolidation between Comcast and Time Warner would allow them to have a complete large pipe to which basically they can negotiate with all the content providers. And we've seen DirecTV go hand in hand with AMC, right?
Right.
And they got spanked, and let's be honest, they got a little bit spanked. And so, and I say this because I actually remember somebody reaching out to me about the senior, the senior VP of programming for DirecTV in Colorado and called me and said, would you like to take on this role? And I think I might have said something like, I'm sorry, you're getting spanked right now by AMC. And I don't think that this is going to be a fun role to be in. This is not a fun place to be in that negotiation. And so, but a consolidated AT&T and DirecTV, now that's actually a force to be reckoned with. That is a senior, SVP of programming that I would like to potentially tackle.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't understand. Like, what kind of content is going over the AT&T network? So you've got the AT&T Uverse, which is their broadband / TV service similar to FiOS. Is that what you're referring to in terms of this consolidated bargaining power? Because otherwise, you know what it is? We're not in a market that has Uverse. So maybe that's why I'm not as aware of it.
Yeah, they absolutely have that service out where we are. I don't get it here myself, but it is in the local region here. And certainly, you remember, I think AT&T is about, they believe and sell into the mobile space. And so, if you're buying yourself and if net neutrality, it goes all back to what Waz is saying, if you have a pipe to the mobile phone, for example, you now can actually deliver, you could favor yourself to basically deliver some amazingly good content now through the phone because you've got a fast pass on a phone and a tablet.
You can favor yourself. It's an interesting
way
of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I got a song from the Divinals in my head now, just going. But anyway, okay.
We could violate copyright and play that at the end of the show.
Yeah, I don't think so. We don't need. This is a fun show. We don't make any money from it. We don't want to be sued.
Nobody sue us. We have no money.
We have no money. It's just really, come on. All right. So let's move on to something that I think is even more interesting. Why? It's not all that on the surface. It's not exciting. It's really kind of boring, but it goes back to something we were talking about earlier. So there is a new device on the market called the Tableau, which is a horrible, horrible name. It's a standalone over-the-air DVR. And I think this line came from Wired, that you tuck away in whatever corner of the house gets the best over-the-air reception. And that's it. You get 720p DVR'd content over the air. And for, I don't know, a couple $100 maybe. I don't want to speak at a school here, so I'll pull up the article. But for not a lot of money, you get this device, which is like a TiVo that pulls stuff down over the air. And that's legal. How is it that this company isn't getting sued by all of the cable and TV companies, et cetera, the way Aereo is? That's a leading question, by the way. We all know the answer.
Yeah. It is the nuance and again, went to law school for exactly the nuance of like how these things are delivered. It's really not even the technology. It is about the technology, but it is about how you word that in a contract and the content licenses and where the law stands in terms of broadcasting. It's ridiculous.
So what kind of content could you pull down to a DVR from the air? Like broadcast?
Anything that broadcasts in your local market.
Okay. Yep. Which is like 6 channels?
Well, the cable channels actually would be included in that, wouldn't it?
They would?
Yeah. So, today, if you actually had HBO delivered to your DVR box, you could probably record it in your DVR and record it and then basically sling it or use HBO Go. So this actually cuts into the HBO Go piece.
So could you tape it off of your wireless network?
I don't know if it's about taping as much as,
or DVRing off of your, yeah.
No. But this is all over the air. So over the air, let's be clear. When we say over the air, we're talking about the stuff that's broadcast from TV stations.
The stuff we used to get on our televisions with antennas.
It's right. So it's still the big shows. It's Super Bowl. It's the big games that we're going to see. The things that are, live. Oh, like the Sound of Music on NBC over the holidays, that kind of stuff.
Right. But this is totally legal.
Yeah.
It's totally legal because I bought the box and it sits in my living room. or wherever I decide to put it. But so it's got an antenna, and I can play the content back on a variety of devices: computers, television, tablets, etc. So I just find it so perfect in a way that this device would come out right now. In fact, I would almost it wouldn't surprise me if the people from Aereo helped get this product on the market right now. Because really, what is the difference between pulling it down on a local antenna versus a remote antenna? I don't see it.
Absolutely. And it doesn't seem like you have those little, what is it, the Aereo like antenna farms.
Yes.
Right.
The antenna farms are crazy. Have you ever seen photos of them? There's like thousands in like a span of like a shelf and like, a few feet. It's pretty incredible, actually. It's all custom hardware from what I hear. But it's no different, because especially in the Tableau, it doesn't even it doesn't have to connect to your television. You can set it up in the best place in your house where you get the best reception. And then you can watch it over the air, meaning on Wi-Fi or over Ethernet, on a tablet or on a TV. It doesn't even require a television. So it is almost like having your own Aereo, your own personal Aereo.
Does it come with? It comes with like two antennas, right? Like rabbit ears ish.
I didn't get that from the article, but
Okay.
it's got to come. It obviously comes with
Something.
Well, it must actually. It must.
It has to pull something out of the wave, right?
Yeah. So there's the digital. There's a digital. There must be a digital antenna, right? For recording HD content, and then it also records SD. So there is most likely an analog antenna, so you can get your local stations, your local channels in SD format, which would make sense.
Wow. Antenna.
I know. Remember?
Oh, but antenna does not come with it. You have to buy in addition. There's a monthly fee.
They're cheap. I mean, our buddy Steve bought this little $25 antenna that he uses in his living room, and that's what he uses to watch local TV on. And it works. It's digital, but it works.
I used to have one of those things, the shark, looked like a shark fin, but it was an antenna.
Yeah, but that was for radio.
For computers, yeah.
Yeah, that was cool. That was very cool.
Was what you were talking about Steve-O? The Steve-O?
No, the Steve-O is something he built on his own. He doesn't have it anymore. It was I don't even remember what software it was. It's been so long. But it was an open source. He built his own machine with a couple of hard drives and an open source DVR tool. And yeah.
We used to all call it the Steve-O.
Yes, we did call it the Steve-O.
So I was like, it's an updated Steve-O.
It is an updated Steve-O. And I didn't get the price point actually on it. This is the third time I'm launching this article. What is the price point on this bad boy? I think it's $150.
What? $50 for a year subscription, or you could pay $150 for lifetime service. Dude, $150 for lifetime service is certainly cheaper than that lifetime service the TiVo people used to con us into. Remember, you pay $400 for a lifetime.
Oh yeah, we had
you want to upgrade your box.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Because when you upgrade your box, you had to pay again, or you get a credit. We had the first one. It wasn't TiVo. There was a company before TiVo. Now it's going to kill me. I can't remember what it was, but that we had. And same thing. We had a lifetime. License, and then the hard drive died. And as soon as we replaced the hard drive, they told me we had to pay for another license. I'm like, what? So I threw it out. I got rid of it. I wasn't going to do that.
So there's no pricing on the actual hardware, but the subscription service is what they shared. So
why am I paying for a subscription service to pull stuff down over the air on my local market? Okay.
That's a catch.
There is a catch. Okay. I might as well use Aereo then, providing it's still around. All right. Well, that's interesting. So let's see. What else was interesting? More video. I'm telling you, this is like the video show. Except, of course, the New York Times thing, which we have to get to soon, because that is a whole show in and of itself.
Yes.
Get your gadgets out of your system, and we can talk about real stuff when you're done.
Real stuff. Yes, I know. All right. Well, this is important. And in a way, this is almost as bad as net neutrality. I should say it is almost as contentious as the net neutrality issue. There we go. Mozilla has decided that if they want to be relevant, they're going to support the DRM extensions to HTML. All right. What is this, Charlene?
Okay, so for I guess the longest time, Mozilla did not, in fact, support DRM as a plugin for its very popular, or actually now not as popular, web browser. And so by supporting a DRM, that means that you can't watch a whole lot of things because anything that might be streaming that could be falling under the DRM would be DRM'd, and so therefore you had to pay for it. So that actually completely, to a certain degree, messes with pirating, utilizing Mozilla. So, okay, now Firefox will have a DRM extension. So,
yeah, so but it's not even an extension, right? These are, how do I put this? These are new tags. Let's call them in HTML. And when these tags are present, if the browser recognizes the tags, they will essentially
traffic.
Right. They'll be able to segment the traffic and make it so that it cannot be displayed on screens larger than X resolution or be copied.
Or completely even bypassed, right? Or blocked, right? So
right. Yeah. So what I find interesting about all this though is that, Mozilla hasn't been all that relevant lately. Chrome has been huge, right? It's really come a long way in terms of the base of users that it has. Safari is obviously huge. I don't know how much on the desktop, but of course you have all those iPhone and iPad users. So Safari itself is used quite a bit. Firefox, not so much. And my guess here is that they don't want to be relegated to complete obscurity because they don't support the DRM that is proposed by the governing body, which they shouldn't be. The governing body should not be proposing DRM anyway because it breaks the open internet, but that's another discussion. But yeah, I think they just don't want to be left behind. If suddenly the Firefox browser I have on my computer doesn't work with Netflix, I'm not going to use it anymore. Yeah, shaking your head. But what else is there to say?
There is nothing to say because I actually don't even have Firefox on my laptop right now. So
yeah, I do just for testing purposes. But that's it. Like, it's not my daily browser. My daily browser is Chrome. So yeah. That scares me though quite a bit. I mean, it's one thing you want to be able to protect content, and it was fine when you used Flash or Silverlight. Remember Silverlight? Yes.
Oh, God.
If that's what you wanted to use to protect your content, that's fine. But to bake this stuff into standard, HTML, it's as bad as the net neutrality argument.
Ponderous.
Does not seem like there's a lot of good news for us, for those people who are interested in open internet. So
yeah, really, let's think about this for a moment. What happens? I guess there's nothing stopping you from delivering unencrypted or non-DRM'd video, I guess, right? So if you wanted to produce this content in a way that was not encrypted, I guess you could still do that. So it still doesn't hold the little guys back, I guess. So in that regard, it's a good thing. Unless I'm missing something. So it's really just about big media. All right, big media wins again. All right, moving on. You know what? Let's just continue with the bad news. Let's just get all the bad news out of our system. Comcast, our favorite broadband company, is planning to have data caps for all of their customers in the next 5 years.
So what
could
does that
be.
mean? What does that mean?
So it basically means that
I have Xfinity internet.
Xfinity, yes. Well, you have Xfinity. So what does it mean? It means that it's no different than your cell phone plan. That's what it means. So you have a family plan?
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got you, the two girls, and your wife. So
Yeah.
the four of you share what? 6 gig, 10 gig a month?
10.
10 gig. This is no different. Except obviously it's wired and it's less expensive to deliver. But they're talking about giving you 500 gig for the month. That's it. All in. You go over your 500 gig, you pay.
That's completely insane because we went into the Netflix streaming only plan and we signed up for Hulu because, well, we have a 6-year-old, for Christ's sakes. She watches a lot of streaming videos. We should have just basically let her not watch television.
Well, that's what they want, right? Oh, it's like, well, this goes back to the whole net neutrality thing. There was an issue a number of months back where, God, you'll have to help me, but it was a streaming service from Comcast that was on Xbox, and if you streamed that, it didn't count towards your data caps. But if you streamed other stuff, meaning from outside the Comcast network, it counted towards your data caps. And this is exactly the kind of stuff that we're worried about. So same thing, my son and his Minecraft videos, the kid watches hours of Minecraft videos, hours, which, by the way, Craig, you don't have to worry about this. Shylin, you may. I have learned all about parental controls in our network. Yes. So now Jack can only use his devices between 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. That's it. So after 8 p.m., all of a sudden, if he's in the middle of watching something, poof, it just stops, and it's time for bed.
I came home and my 15-year-old was watching Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know enough about that to comment, but
it's
a little risque. Yes,
it's not teen friendly.
It's not teen friendly. So the data caps are just like, it's like buying your iPhone when it had an unlimited data service, and then all of a sudden having it slowed down over time when unlimited no longer became unlimited, right? So this is even worse. They're gonna cap it at 500 gig, or potentially, and think about that for a moment. They're already speculating as to how many gigabytes they're going to cap it at 5 years from now, which is just silly because we have no idea. Obviously, we're going to be using more data in the next 5 years. That's just a given. So I don't even know how they could throw out that number at this point.
Because they did a revenue study that said the average user is going to use this much, so we should cap it below that so everybody goes over at least a little, and some people will go over a lot, and we'll make tons of money.
And not upgrade our service in the process. Yeah. Oh, all right. I'm starting. This is starting to. All right. There's a down.
This is a depressing show.
Really, it's a downer. It's a total downer. All right. Do I have some good news here? No, not yet. All right. Maybe later.
Well, the funny, I had to laugh. You have the Apple and Google call off the truce and patent wars, and I saw that. I'm starting like, yes. And then I read like the next story is Apple and Samsung heat up. Mobile phone wars.
Yeah. I mean, Apple and Google are going to call a truce, but right now Apple and Samsung are still in the final throes of litigation on their existing suit. So things are still going to be ugly, but hopefully things will improve after that.
That's because really Google doesn't have to call a truce with Apple because they've got their patsy Samsung doing all the crazy work for.
They already stole the stuff. It's like, forget it,
They're funding and they're providing legal funding to Samsung to help support that litigation for Samsung against Apple, so they don't actually have to get their hands dirty at all.
And Steve Jobs is dead, so they're not afraid.
Well, they're not afraid. Right? If Steve were around, they'd really,
absolutely, because he was the one that was like manic about it.
Yes, he wanted to go thermonuclear war on them. Yes, I remember that. All right, let's get to the other side of digital media. Is this the other side? I don't know if it's the other side. But it was a huge deal. All right, first of all, we should talk about this, which is a show in and of itself, but I will not allow it to be because we don't have time. So the first woman editor at the New York Times was fired recently.
Unceremoniously fired.
Unceremoniously fired. Yes. Jill Abramson is no longer there. There's lots of speculation and rumor and hearsay and all these reasons as to why they believe she was fired. But the one thing we are sure of is that one of the contributing factors was the results that were put forth in a New York Times innovation report regarding digital media. And of course I won't say of course, I should say the report itself was somewhat critical about the Times in general, the organization, its management, of which Abramson happened to be one, of course. And it's not pretty. Craig, you actually said that you spent the time to go through it. So I'm going to default to you as the overseer of this part of the conversation.
I didn't go through it as deeply as I probably should, and I highly recommend it to anybody who kind of wants to get an insight into the business of media and how far newspapers have fallen. And I have some inside experience with the New York Times. I ran digital marketing at NewYorkTimes.com for 5 years. I won the Punch Sulzberger Award for Innovation and way back in 2005. And I guess for me, the biggest takeaway was the Times hasn't changed at all in 15 years since they first really got involved in the internet, and I just had to laugh when people were, the big conclusion was, oh my God, the Times finally gets it, and now they understand digital media and where they've made their mistakes, and that's just a bunch of malarkey, because the Times. Well, let me go on record and say I have utmost respect for the brand. I have utmost respect for the journalists. I went to University of Missouri Journalism School, so I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. But my God, what an incompetent bunch of bumbling boobs that the business side at the Times is so ridiculously inept. And the management of the Times is just so mediocre that it doesn't surprise me one bit. And the thing is that they find as they go out and hire overpriced consultants one after another to tell them things they already know that the average person in media or advertising could have told them. Some of the things were just like mind-boggling revelations. The report, I mean, really, if you are interested in the history of media, the history of online advertising, do yourself a favor, get a cup of coffee or a beer and just read through this thing online. And who was it leaked to? It was BuzzFeed. I think it was leaked to BuzzFeed.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know who it was leaked to originally.
I think it was linked to somebody at BuzzFeed, but which is ironic because that is, one of the brands that has basically in 3 years eaten their lunch. So some of the things were the Times is woefully behind in tagging practices, right? People who are newspaper businesses about indexing, curating content, and they've been doing this since the beginning of the internet, and they still haven't figured out how to tag their content. For God's sakes, people, wake up and smell the coffee. They're saying that, like, the recipes, the New York Times is about, cooking. And,
Yep, I just saw that
they
myself.
don't even tag their recipes by ingredients or time to prepare. I mean, this is like basic blocking and tackling. And, it's easy to take shots, but it is the height of hubris, right? And the other thing I had to laugh, they say they have this, but yet they have 30 people in analytics, 445 people in tech, and over 24 engineers, 120 people in product. With that many people, with a room full of computers, you could take over a mid-sized South American country. And these boobs can't even figure out how to distribute the finest journalistic content, around. But I mean, the other thing is, they were saying, this is the thing that got me. And the Twitter account is run by the newsroom.
Yeah, I saw this.
And Facebook is run by the business side, right? Because in their mind, Facebook you make money with. So the business side runs that. And Twitter is about, it says, the quote was, many in the newsroom are under the impression that social media exists to promote their work. I mean, how ludicrous can you and how egocentric can you be? Twitter and Facebook are about growing your audience. Twitter and Facebook are about engaging with your customers and your users and creating experience and bringing people closer to the brand. These knuckleheads, all they care about, I need to get my byline out because I can't make any money, writing books anymore because it's all free on the internet. That was the whole thing. I mean, granted, I was at the Times 10 years ago, but even then it was all about, you're just giving it away for free. We are working so hard to create world-class content, and you're just giving it away. It's like, well, you know what? The world has changed. Embrace it, and the other thing is, I went away on 2 retreats, and the first one we did the Innovator's Dilemma, and then what was the second one? I can't remember what it was. It was the same guy who wrote a follow-up book. But we basically were given the playbook on how not to do what these knuckleheads have done. They have just basically let the guys in the garage, the BuzzFeeds, the Huffington
Post, yeah.
And this one that I'm not real familiar with, but they keep referring to Circa. You heard of Circa?
No.
I'm sure it's some sort of a news platform. And
I know of Circa, yes.
Have just come in and just completely outplayed them. And I mean, I'll stop here. But one of the things was, one of the most viewed pieces of content on Flipboard was a guy who collected all the Times obits and put them on Flipboard. And it was by far one of the most utilized sections of content, but the Times couldn't figure that out. And the kind of the last thing I think that kind of really tells what's wrong with this whole thing is this: the Times undervalues replication, right?
What do you mean by replication?
Meaning creating something that can be reproduced, a format that can be think Business Insider. How many times have you seen the same structure and format, reused over and over? It's the same with BuzzFeed, the top 10, foods that you shouldn't eat on Christmas,
and you'll never guess what happened next.
Right. Well, we are above that. We would rather create some crazy expensive custom project that costs you know, hundreds of hours and millions of dollars to create a one-off. So we can sit back and say, look how great we are, and maybe win a Pulitzer Prize. But your audience, at the time I was there, the average Times reader was 65. I gotta believe it's probably closer to 70 now. But I'll stop my rant. But one of the things that just made me the most, I love reading the Times, but I got to tell you, for me, since they went to this crazy paid model, I don't really read it online, but I will buy a physical newspaper from time to time as kind of a treat. It's like getting a leather-bound book, you know? It's this special thing that's tactile when I read it. But I got to tell you, the thing that makes me so insane is the movie reviews.
Why? Why them specifically?
They refuse to use stars because they are above it. And I kid you not, every time I read a Times movie review, I can't figure out whether they're telling me this is a good movie and I should go see it, or it's not a good movie and I shouldn't see it. I mean, it is so like confusing because they just can't bring themselves to say, this is a good movie, you should see it, we give it 3 stars, right? It's just like the height of arrogance. And you know, when we lived in an analog world, they could get away with it. And you know what? Even in the beginning of the digital world, you know, when I was there in Web 1.0, you know, you could see it coming, but they just weren't going to believe it. And the people who were there didn't care because they would be retired by the time it came. And it's, you know, the problem is it's a great company, it's a great brand, but they are a study in mediocrity.
Well, I think you kind of made the bigger, well, 2 points even in that. The first point is that newspapers, you know, as a general rule, were always local in nature, right? Now, New York Times obviously is an exception at this point, but for the most part, they covered a local, you know, they covered a geographic area, right? Mm-hmm. And you were, you know, over time, you basically became the paper of record for a particular geographic area. And if you wanted news, you basically, if the consumer wanted news, the newspaper had a monopoly on the printed on the regularly printed page, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was always just like, well, what are they going to do? Not buy the paper? Well, and no one could consider the alternative. So I think that mindset has stuck around.
And you know what fueled that mindset was the fact that newspapers were a cash machine with classified ads.
Right.
So you had the New York Times, before the internet came, made 60% of their revenue off of classified ads.
I didn't realize it was that high. Wow.
All you had to do was have people picking up a phone and taking orders. You didn't have to pay writers. You didn't have to pay photographers. You know, that was it. You just picked it up and said, you rang the cash machine. And that went away. And the great thing about it is you had 2 revenues or 3 revenue sources. You had classifieds, you had subscription revenue, and you had advertising. And the dirty little secret is that even with advertising and subscription revenue, you basically broke even with subscription revenue.
Subscription, right.
And the idea was during a good economy, a good market, you made money with classifieds and advertising. And when classifieds went away and they would hit a bad advertising market like the .com crash, they were in the toilet. They went there, and they still haven't recovered from that. Their ad revenues are going down every single year.
Yeah, they're pretty heavily leveraged, if I'm not mistaken, over at the Times. But the second key point here, I think, which came through in your analysis there, is that there's this lack of unity between. There's still this old. Or here's a better way of putting it. again, with the old school mentality, there's still this old school mentality that the business side and the journalism side are separate. They don't manage them. They don't manage them together.
Okay, but it's not just, I mean, there's that piece. I think there's two fundamental pieces. Is that they don't manage them together, but also, most importantly, that the digital side does not have any power.
Exactly.
Right? Because the executives at the company is driven by editorial. Now, don't get me wrong. Under Jill Abramson, they went from, I think 2, Pulitzers to 8, I believe. So it's not that she didn't have a tremendous power around editorial, but what has she done in terms of, really understanding the digital media and how to leverage that for, pushing the great editorial products that she was driving. And so but editorial always drove the business decisions.
I don't have any insights into what really happened, but I guess from what I could read was she really didn't get along with certain people. I think they kept referring to her abrasive management style.
Oh, please. What editorial executive at New York Times is not mercurial and abrasive? In fact, her predecessor also had that basically attached to him. And yes, maybe the one that's following her is not so abrasive, but if we actually let every single mercurial, abrasive, executive editor go from New York Times, this hallowed halls would ring empty.
I guarantee you, if she was bringing in revenues, it would be fine. She would be looked upon as a colorful character. But the irony is that in Only Times style is, and I don't know the gentleman who replaced her, but only in Times style could they, replace a woman editor with the first black editor. And I don't know. I'm not making any judgments on it. He may be a fantastic editor, but I just kind of, I don't know. It just doesn't seem right.
Which part? The way the whole thing ended, and then
it's almost like they're compensating for it, and I have no idea. Maybe he was the right guy for the job, and I again, but it just seems so like so Timesian.
Honestly, I'm just surprised. I mean, I do not necessarily believe that, as great an editor he may be, the new guy coming in is any better at digital. His entire pedigree is also tied to, your old school classic business, for newspapers. And so what I'd like to see basically shake up the New York Times is for them to basically bring somebody, oh, God forbid that I say this. So just
Jason Calacanis, editor, New York Times.
God.
Jonah Peretti. Oh, Jason Calacanis. I love that.
Exactly. Because here's a reality, right? You've got to have somebody who really gets the 21st century in terms of how to market content. And the dirty little secret is it could be Jason Calacanis. It could be Tyler Goldman from Buzz Media, right?
Ariana Huffington.
Exactly. But you've got to get somebody who gets 21st century content delivery and distribution. You got to know people who know how to chunk up great content and make it appealing.
And can I tell you another thing that just used to drive me insane? I was on the senior management team, and literally one time I sat in a meeting, lots of meetings, and every single person in that meeting, except for me, and Martin Eisenholtz, who went to Penn.
Oh yeah.
And the head of sales, Jason Krebs, went to West Virginia, and I went to Missouri, so we were 2 states. Every other person there was a Harvard MBA. And there were 10 other people there. And they're good people, smart people, but if you are a top achiever, Harvard MBA, you do not go to the New York Times.
Hey, okay,
mediocre Harvard MBAs go to the New York Times.
Leave the MBAs alone, because there are some of us MBAs who love media and cannot. It has nothing to do with whether or not. But what I will tell you this is that the people who came. Think about the MBAs that came into the time that you were in the 2000, early 2000s and late 1990s. for the digital world. There was not one business person coming out of business school. They all wanted to jump into the digital ship. They all wanted to jump into media because that was a sexy thing to do. It was the sign of the times. It had less to do with training. If you look at
it was the Jack Welch era. Everybody wanted to be Jack Welch. But I'm not, and again, I'm not, some of these Harvard MBAs are my good friends, but I just felt it was all the same thing talking to each other, right? There was no, and there was not a lot of diversity. I mean, pretty much, I don't know, I don't want to say it, but heavily Jewish, but, and again, it doesn't mean anything. It's just that everybody is the same thing. If you don't have any other, if you're all kind of wealthy, privileged kids that went to Ivy League schools, you need a mix, right? And
ultimately, I again, don't want to speak to that piece of it, but, and the reality for me is that we've talked about this since 2007 when we first started this podcast, right? Is that fundamentally the reason why some of the old media companies fail is because, and some of, is that they don't like to embrace within their leadership ranks people who bring new technology forethoughts. So when they bring in onesie, twosie tech people like you, or, you're like Don Quixote tilling against a windmill, because you're the one voice of reason typically, and you've got to convince everybody else and corral them into this newfangled thing called the internet and technology, right? And sadly, 15 years later, you still look at all these companies, and where are there people who basically were born and bred out of the technology industry, taking helm in the leadership, in major leadership roles within the old media companies? You still do not see those people at any of the old media companies. They basically have old media company people who had, 5 years of background in running, digital media for that company alone, right? And we are now looking at an entire generation of business people who have spent their entire lives in digital media. But yet, none of these companies are hiring those people to take over the helm. There is not a large proliferation of those people running the business side. And that fundamentally is the issue. Forget about whether or not people are, women, minorities, Jewish, whatever side. It's actually about where did you come from fundamentally from a mindset perspective on a business side.
And again, and I know I'm going to get hate mail but it doesn't matter what your background is, but if you're all the same, there's no different perspective, and I think that you need that different perspective. And I can tell you that, obviously Martin Niesenholz is a very respected guy in the digital industry and very smart, and but he was basically pushed out because they didn't want to listen to him. And he built a virtual all-star team of the early digital days at nytimes.com. And once the paper started going on hard times and the circulation started going down and digital started going up, that they basically did a hostile takeover, and all of anybody who had any kind of digital background or was really looking at doing innovative things. And I'm not talking about myself. There are many other people who are more talented and more innovative than me who were basically ethnically cleansed out of the company because, they were seen as a threat to the mothership. And it's really sad. And, if some of those people had stayed around, they maybe wouldn't be in this predicament.
All right. So prediction time. We're going to end it here. We're going to end it right here. Prediction time. Will they be able to do it? Will they be able to turn themselves around and make themselves relevant for the digital age? Or will they slowly just slide into obscurity until finally someone snaps them up just for the brand?
My prediction is that they're like radio. They're just going to kind of you know, be the second class media and, you know, have a strong brand and kind of be respected, but not really taken seriously. No, I don't think they'll ever be a relevant media brand, unfortunately.
So this is me. I think of Jeff Bezos or a tech company is going to acquire them. And I think that they acquire them for the brand because they need the media property and the brand equity or the brand goodwill. And so maybe somebody with that sort of savvy and background like a Jeff Bezos could take over a New York Times. I mean, from all intents and purposes, from what I'm understanding from folks coming out of Washington Post, things are going well there. So
I'm with Shailene. I think that someone who, the way I look at it is, by the way, so you guys have both remember this, right? Do you guys remember in the heady days of the .com, the original .com boom, reverse mergers? Remember those?
Yep.
Oh, yes.
Yes, where these private companies would acquire a public shell company in order to get themselves public, because it was a way for them to gain credibility. It's like, what? We went from private to public. Hey, we're a public company. We were liquid. Now you can buy and sell our stock. I look at this as the same way. I feel like there are going to be new media companies that are going to look for that brand cachet that only a purchase of an organization like the New York Times is going to give them. And so I'm just making this up, right? But, you know, it's like I could see BuzzFeed buying the New York Times because they want that old media cred, right? They want that credibility. It may not be BuzzFeed, of course, but someone like them, I think, is going to make that purchase, and they're going to try and leverage that old media brand into the digital age. But the New York Times itself, the Sulzbergers, you know, the whole thing, I don't think they're going to do it on their own.
Well,
Prediction.
the
AOL.
thing is, it's a family.
Ooh, AOL, that's a good one, actually, because they're really trying hard.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's a family-owned company, and the family has to want to sell.
They still have shareholders, don't they?
Yeah, but the family has the voting stock, and and there is some rumblings that there are people within the Sulzberger family who are, for the first time, are saying, you know what, I'm tired of taking it in the teeth on Wall Street, and maybe we should sell. I can't imagine Arthur Sulzberger selling the New York Times in his lifetime. Maybe his kids will sell it. I just don't see it happening.
It'll be too late by then.
It's already too late. I mean, I think, for me, I think a news brand like Vice is more relevant than the New York Times, unfortunately. That's a brand built on, pushing the envelope.
Yeah, it's built on good journalism. It's built on street cred. It's built on smart marketing and audience development, and and native advertising, and all the things that go into creating a modern media brand. Mm-hmm. All right, so we're gonna leave it there, kids. We're a little over tonight, but I think it was well worth the time spent. I want to thank you both. So we'll go backwards this time, Ms. Simmons. If someone wants to reach out to you and thank you for joining us this evening, how do they do that?
Well, it's a pleasure being here. And so they can find me online. Just Google my name, Shailene Simmons. You can find me on my website, www.ShaileneSimmons, that's CHIALINSIMMONS.com.
Awesome. Thank you. Mr. Calder, so people want to reach out to you and thank you for your raving diatribe. No, I'm just kidding. If they want to reach out and thank you for participating tonight, how can they do that?
First of all, just to say my diatribe is because I'm passionate about the brand, and it really hurts me to see the opportunity lost. But you can reach me at craig@craigcalder.com, C Calder on most social media channels.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. And of course, I'm John Federico. You can find me on the interwebs at Gadget Boy, pretty much everywhere, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. You can find this show. You can find this show on iTunes. You can find us on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and a bunch of other podcast aggregators. But those are the big guys. And of course, You can watch us on YouTube, and you can see my half-painted office, and you can watch us sipping drinks and all of that if that's your thing. So you can find us on YouTube there. Just go to the Googles and search for On Digital Media, and you'll find the YouTube channel. So until next time, this has been On Digital Media for, what the hell is the date? May 20th, 2014. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you. Bye-bye.